Alrighty then, welcome to yet another exciting episode of the Online Prosperity Show. And this is the number one place for exclusive conversations with the thinkers, the builders, and operators that are actually reshaping the way business and life actually work in the real world. I'm your host, Prosper Taruvenga. And if you have ever, or if you are building a business that maybe looks successful on the outside, but secretly feels like a very expensive job, well, let me tell you something. My guest today is going to help you realize that business should actually be surviving without you. And I know so many of us are studying these businesses and we want to be the ones that are doing everything else. But hey, you could actually be the bottleneck in that very business. So today, let's welcome back to the show my favorite guest on this particular episode. Now, David, welcome to the show.
David Guest, that's right. Thanks, Prosper. A lovely introduction. So thanks so much. And we were just comparing bookshelves before, and yours has got way more books stuffed into it than mine. So you win.
Absolutely. You see, but then the actual thing that needs to happen, that information has to be on here, but you have already sucked so much of that information from most of the books, which is what you're going to be helping us with today. So absolutely, I can't wait to jump into this, because for those that are meeting David for the very first time, let me just take you from under that internet rock you've been hiding under, because David just doesn't help businesses grow. He actually helps founders escape becoming the unpaid emergency department of their own company. So if you know anyone who can't switch off or is still approving everything and gets cold when the printer jams in their office, that person just has a very, very expensive job. And if their business can't operate, what was that again, David? You told me the business has to operate for 3 months. You said three.
Well, ideally, you should be able to take time out of your business. And I think people get stuck in operations. They get stuck working in versus working on, as famously Michael Gerber pointed out in his book, The E-Myth. And it sounds easy to say it. It's very difficult to do it.
Absolutely. Well, Michael Gerber came up with his E.M.E.D.I.A, and you've created your own leverage operating system, which is a system that is designed to remove founders as that operational bottleneck and install business architecture that actually scales. Now, David, I could go on and talk about things I'm not even qualified to talk about. Tell us a little bit about what outcomes used to be and what it is now.
Sure. Look, we've known each other for quite a long time now, but I started Outcomes Business Group in 2001. So we're in our 25th year this year. And principally, we started off as a business coaching firm. And I spent pretty much the most of that 25 years coaching individual business owners one-on-one, which is interesting because when I did the numbers, I was terrified by actually how many one-on-one interviews I've had with individual business owners talking about their goals, their aspirations, and their bottlenecks. It's in excess of 5,000 that I've actually documented and recorded. And so that sounds like a lot, right? But in today's world, 5,000 you can do in 3 seconds using any AI. But the reality is that wisdom or that knowledge, because every time I meet with a business owner, the first question I ask them is, why did you go into business in the first place? What is your goal? What is your aspiration? And where are you right now? Then we move into the bottlenecks, which is what's stopping you from being successful. So I've tabulated all this information over 25 years. I've used it to evolve our process, our program. I've used it to help business owners fast track their growth. And so it sort of led us to building what we now refer to as the Leverage OS, the Leverage Operating System. And the whole definition behind it is that term leverage. If you think about the definition, leverage means doing more with less. And I think for a lot of people in business, they get stuck on the treadmill and they go into business for all the right reasons. But then what happens is the business starts taking control of their lives. And my favorite metaphor around this, it's a bit like a 4-year-old taking a Great Dane for a walk, right? The question is, who's walking who? right? So we go into business going, hey, I'm going to go into business so that I can have freedom and lifestyle choices and lots of money and never have to work too hard. And the reality is, for most people in business, they're working harder than they ever did before they started their business for less than what is legally payable to an employee. So we see many things that are stopping people from growing.
Absolutely. Now, and thank you so much for opening us up with that. I love the term leverage because I think I can't remember who said this, but it must have been Chuck Frey or somebody that says, "Give me a place to stand and then leave it long enough and I will move the world." So I can only imagine if you are giving people that sort of leverage, they'll be able to move their own worlds around that. And I love how you've also mentioned you've done the the 5,000 one-to-ones. If any of them average maybe 2 hours or so, you've actually done the 10,000 hours that is required for you to become an expert in this game then.
And that's just individual new conversations with new business owners. Above and beyond that, then there's the coaching conversations that we have that are regular contact. So I guess the data is interesting because, one of the things, and I started to pick this up many years ago, but it's evolved, is understanding what the common problems are for most business owners. And ironically, it almost doesn't matter what industry you're in. And if you're okay with it, because you asked me if I'm going to draw anything today, and I probably will, I can draw a few models just to help people understand what the dilemma is that people in business are facing today. Because as you can imagine, we're moving in a highly competitive environment. Business is getting tougher, right? And there's no two ways about it. The reason it's getting tougher is that more people can enter a market easier. The governments are looking for ways to pay back all their debt that they've created over the past 10 years. And the business owner is the obvious person to go to. So especially in Australia, when we have Labor governments, what we're doing is we're erring on the side of the employee, which means for the people running businesses, it's a tough one, right? Because what it means is they have to work out how do they maintain profitability so they can keep running their business while still being able to navigate things like working from home, adjustments in pay, inflation, cost of living, and those kind of things. So it becomes a really interesting pressure cooker for people who are trying to scale their businesses right now.
Absolutely. And I'm still really hung up on those 5,000 hours because what that mean 5,000 people that spoke to one-to-one. What that
Yeah.
means is obviously you would have been coaching all these founders to build businesses,
Mm.
for themselves, but you were secretly running a business that depended on you because if you were not there, who was doing those one-to-one?
Exactly. So here's been the dilemma of my past 25 years is I teach people how to run a business that works without them, but I'm a coach, which means my business relies on me. And so it's sort of it's a very difficult scenario when people say, well, you're teaching us how to leverage ourselves out of business, but you're not. And it's a really interesting question. And the question is, why not? Now, I've attempted many different ways to scale my business, and you've probably watched the journey. We had up to 15 employees at one point in time, just pre-COVID. So 9 coaches and a full support staff, and we had a massive office, and we were building a coaching business. And one of the things I realized, and COVID sort of accentuated it, was for those people who are coaches in your audience, they're going to get this, right? Every coach coaches differently. And one of the hardest things to scale in a business is when there's no consistency in service delivery. So trying to build a coaching business, I found exceptionally challenging because every coach is very strong in their view of the world and how they do things and their relationships, which is fine. But when you try and build a business that scales, now you have a lot of different sized parts that you have to deal with. It's a bit like trying to put a car together out of all the spare parts that are available from all the different manufacturers. You could probably do it if you're an engineer, but it's a lot easier if they're all Toyota parts because at least there's a good chance of them fitting together. So my wife pulled me up on this one night because she does that. She's the person who speaks the truth in our relationship. Is she says, David, you teach people leverage and you teach people that they should be able to walk away from their business for 3 months. Have you ever looked in the mirror? And it was a tough question to answer. So the reality check for me was, well, when we talk about business, and I guess this is one of the fundamental questions is what is the purpose of a business? What does a business exist to do? Right? If I threw that question at you, Prosper, what comes to mind?
Obviously, a business is there to make a profit and to make more customers. And
Right.
I think that's a standard definition of what a business should be.
Right. So what happens is based on that definition, everyone's chasing the dollar. It's all about growth. Okay. Now, here's what I learned. After speaking to 5,000 individuals, people say that's what they want, but it's not really what they want. Some people, freedom doesn't mean not working. Some people, freedom means not having to do the stuff I don't want to do. For some people, freedom means expression. So when I talk to some of those business owners are artists, as an example, and I'll use the term artist because it's a very strong term. If you're an artist that does paintings, okay, or if you even did statues, right, that's your art, right? So your business is selling the thing that you create. So when we talk about a business that runs without you for an artist, they go, I don't want to not work. This is what I love doing. This is my passion. I build these things or I create these pieces of art so I can express myself to my followers. So for them, the idea of not working in the business doesn't make any sense. Okay. So what I realized is that everyone has a different definition of what business success is. So for the pragmatic person, it's about profit. Okay. Because that's what a business is created to do. For some people, it's not about the profit, it's about serving the client base. So it's about helping people. Okay. For other people, it's a lifestyle choice. It's just that I need enough money to do the things I want to do in my life. And for other people, it's expression. I run my business so that I can communicate my value to the world. Now, neither one of those, any of those, none of them are wrong, right? They're just different. And so the truth of the matter is when we talk about the definition of business and people say, well, the purpose of a business is to make a profit, I will suggest that that's not the direct purpose of a business. And this is the bit where I'm going to start to draw, if that's all right with you.
Absolutely. I'd love to see what it is that actually, happens behind the scenes.
Sure. So if we think about the term business, and you stipulated a very interesting point there, which most people will agree with, is the purpose of a business is to make a profit. But the way that a business makes a profit isn't just by stating, I want to make a profit. The way a business makes a profit is by adding value. So if we think about that, the business needs to identify how can I add value to a marketplace? And that marketplace is inevitably their customer, their target market, whoever that might be. And if they're successful at doing this, if they add value to those guys will pay the business in dollars. And so there's a value transfer. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. Yep. Yep.
Okay. So if you think about this, it sort of covers most bases where you say, my job in business is to add value to my target market, whoever I choose that to be. And if I do it effectively, they will pay me because the value that I create is greater than the dollar they're going to share with me. All right. Now, this is where it sort of gets interesting because the business itself is just an entity. It doesn't have any physical sort of labor in it. It actually is an existence of a brand or a name. That business then needs to deliver whatever the promise is, whether it's product or service, and it usually does that through team. So the business drives the team serves the customer pays the business. And this creates a loop, right? And that loop is how a business should run. Are you making sense so far? The ideal business.
Yes.
Now you'll notice one thing, the thing that's missing out of this loop is this guy.
The business owner.
Yeah. Now in this picture, the business owner overviews. They sit above the business and they basically direct the business, direct the team, and ensure that the customer is being served. But for most people, when they run their business, they don't sit there sipping on lattes every day. They get heavily engaged in the business. And this happens for a number of reasons. The first one, and this is something that people should write down or quote, is that ownership attracts problems. Ownership attracts problems. And I'll explain what I mean. When I meet these people in business that I talk to and I ask them about their aspirations and where they want to take their business to, inevitably we flip to the other side of the coin is what's the bottleneck? What is stopping you? And these are the things that we hear. We can't find good people. If you can't find good people, that problem floats up to the owner. Customers only like to deal with me because I'm the owner. Ownership attracts problems. So customers who are not satisfied with their team will bypass the team, go to the owner. The business isn't profitable. Guess what? You need to stick your hand in your pocket. So you'll notice that all these red lines are what we call problems coming from different elements of the business that attract themselves to the owner because ownership attracts problems.
Problems.
Okay. So we look at this and we say, where's the bottleneck in this business? Where is it?
It's with the owner there because everything relies on him being present.
Right. So the bottleneck is the owner because everything is pointing back to him or her because ownership attracts problems, right? And that's how a normal business runs. So the owner sits there going, God, if I can only find good people, if I can only get more clients, if only I could charge more, all these sorts of things. But what they're really dealing with is these problems that are coming from the business not being self-sustaining. Now, the thing that I identified over this time is that all of these problems show up as what we call suppression, okay? And suppression just means that it slows the business down. Because if I need the owner to be involved in all of these three areas, the owner becomes the bottleneck. Now, here's the funny part. It's not the owner that's the actual bottleneck. The bottleneck is these red lines. The bottleneck is the escalation of problems that shouldn't be escalated, but should be managed by the cycle that we talked about in the first place. And where this shows up in things like payroll. And I'll explain what I mean here, right? It's not just payroll, it's what we call payroll delta, right? It's the difference between what you're paying for and what you're getting. Now, very small businesses where the owner is the team, the reason the owner is the team is because they don't have the cash flow to pay for team members, or they have a fear of control and they say, no one does it as well as I do, and I just want to keep doing it myself because I can't trust team to do things the way I do. And I've seen it before because the customers complain to me as soon as I employ someone. So that's what's called payroll delta. And what I mean by that is that I'm paying for payroll for people, whether they're subcontractors, whether they're offshore, whether they're employees, and I'm not getting a good return on my investment. And so the conclusion is if you want a job done properly, you've heard this before, right? Do it yourself.
Yeah, you got to do it yourself.
Yeah. Now that is a self-fulfilling prophecy because as long as you keep saying that, you get stuck in the engine room of the business. The second one that we hear is we can't find good help, right? And an old mentor of mine used to say, in business, you get the people you deserve, which is a horrible statement, but it's horribly true. Okay. So we start looking at this problem. We go, how do we get rid of these red lines? How do we stop these problems from coming back to the owner? And the short answer is that we need to eliminate these escalations. And the way we do it, there's a couple of different things. The first thing we do is we actually just get the eraser and we rub them out. Okay. But the second thing that we need to do is recognize what the real problem was. And remember when I said ownership attracts problems? So what we need to do is we need to take this thing called owner and we need to move it over to the team. And we call it team ownership. And what that means is we train our team to take care of problems. But the issue is, where did the owner go, right? Now, this is the funny part, right? I say to people, and you mentioned this word at the start of this conversation, is we talked about this word founder. Okay, sounds very American, the word founder. But the reason I like the word founder is a founder is someone who starts something. They found it. All right. An owner is a person who keeps something. So when we call ourselves an owner, we attract problems. But when we call ourselves a founder, we have already changed how we present ourselves to the business. Are you tracking with this so far?
All right.
So the thing is, once we re-identify the person who started the business or is building the business as a founder and not an owner, we start to realize that someone has to take over the ownership. And where we want the ownership to go is we want the ownership to go over here into the team. Now, sometimes we refer to this as self-managed teams, okay? And we say, if you're going to build a business, make sure that you employ team who take ownership of problems. Because now when the problems arise with customers or with the business, the team deals with them instead of the founder.
Okay.
So what ends up happening is this guy at the top, the founder, can now overview. An overview means I make sure things are going the direction I want. I'm not being dragged into day-to-day operations. So this is theory. Okay, but the good news about this theory is that it's backed by science, right? One of the things I did very recently, and let me just come back to the screen. One of the things that I did very recently, and as most of the world is doing now, is turning to AI. I took my 5,000 individual interviews that I've kept records of. I uploaded it into AI, and I said, can you scan all of these interviews and identify what the most common, consistent challenges are for business owners? And it came back and it said something really interesting. Right? Because I would have thought, it's going to be marketing, or it's going to be sales, or it's going to be recruitment. It's actually all of those things. But the most common thing it identified is this thing called suppression. And it said, most business owners get in the way of their own success, right? Because they think they do it better than anyone else. And they think no one wants their team, they want the owner. And they keep justifying in their mind their importance. But the side effect of doing that is that bottleneck, which means the business cannot grow beyond the capacity of the owner. So it's only when someone realizes that they're getting in the way, it's not that you just step back. It's just that you shift gears into being a founder rather than an owner, or a builder rather than an owner-occupier. And when you do that, you change perspective on how you run your business. Now, I don't suggest people do this like a switch, right? It's a dial, right? Because if you do it like a switch, inevitably it will break and you will be back in the engine room faster than you even started. And that's what we call self-sabotage. And that's the person who decided that building a business, having employees is a pain in the neck, right? Because who wants to manage all those people? And that's their justification for why they never got self-managed teams functional. So the measurement is interesting because when we talked about payroll delta, and I'll just go back to this for a second. This thing called payroll delta, this one here. Payroll delta is something that's measurable. And the reason I mentioned payroll delta is the underlying assumption is you're attempting to build a team. Because if you're not paying payroll, you're self-employed. And if you're self-employed, there's no one to delegate to. which is fine. There's nothing wrong with being self-employed, but accept it for what it is. It's a job with an irregular paycheck. That's self-employment, right? A contractor can be even a business coach is a self-employed person with a volatile paycheck. As soon as we start to pay payroll, we're starting to pay people to take tasks away from us. And so think about payroll as an investment. And for most people in business, it's the largest expense they have on their P&L other than cost of materials if they're like a builder or something like that. So when we look at payroll, we know that it's expensive. We know it's going up and not down, right? We also know that it's getting harder because of the situation with the Labor government. So we're starting to see things like, unionisms creeping back in, right? Work from home, extra day off every 2 weeks. All these kind of things are fine, right? Because it's all about lifestyle choices and it's all about protecting the workers. But what we're not thinking about is how we're getting a return on our payroll. Because payroll's broken, and I'll tell you why. When I pay someone for an hour of their time, I'm not considering the quality of their work. I am just considering a clock. So when I pay you for 1 hour and when I pay someone else for 1 hour, in the same categorization, I expect the same yield. But you and I both know that's not true,
That's not
right?
true.
Every person has got superpowers. Some people are better at some things than others, but most of the time we're paying for the hour, not the outcome. And when we pay for the hour and not the outcome, we become our own worst enemy. Because if you work 40 hours and you clock in and clock out, you say, I worked 40 hours, pay me. And it doesn't matter how good you are or how fast you are, you get paid for the time, not for the effort. So we need to start doing the calculations to identify how much money we're leaving on the table. And that's one of the big sort of shifts that we've created in our own business now. Is if we work with someone, the very first thing we do is we say, let's work out what this payroll delta is, or sometimes we call it uncaptured payroll. And that's the difference between what you're paying for and what you're yielding from your wages. Now, it's not to do with getting your team to work harder. It's just to do with knowing what your return on investment is. I'll stop talking for a minute because I've gone for a long time.
Well, thank you. I was really enjoying that. And thank you so much for taking us through all of that. So, in a word, your business actually runs on outcomes, but yet our teams are managed on outcomes. So there is that gap, which is what you guys
Yes.
obviously trying to fill in. That's the delta where people are not able to notice their actual return on payroll. But you mentioned something that is very interesting, especially on your old business, right? Which goes along the lines, every coaches different, and I would like to put this in any other business as well. Any painter paints differently, any plumber plumps differently, or whatever
Yes.
job that they're doing. So a lot of business people that are watching this are probably thinking, but if I stop being involved, you were saying the standards in your business were going down, so there's a catch-22 in all of this. What would you
Yes.
say to somebody who secretly believes that they still are the quality control system backed into their business?
Yes. So that is the majority of people in business, right? They feel that without their presence, the quality will drop.
Mm.
And so what happens is the first thing we need to do is work out why that's happening. And my suggestion is if I'm paying you for hours and not for outcomes, what I'm seeing is you show up to work, clock in, clock off, and do the hours. But if I start focusing on what you produce during that time, and this is very measurable, by the way, because every role, I believe in every business is measurable and more so now than it ever used to be, thanks to the automation that's available, thanks to all the facilities that we can use to capture. Okay. So imagine if I said to you, I'm not going to pay you for an hour of your time, Prosper. I'm going to pay you to write me a piece of copy. Okay. And I will pay you based on whether it actually produces leads for me or not. And then you would love this, right? Right up your alley. But this is just a classic example, right? It would be the same with the plumber. It'd be the same with any industry. And it's difficult to do because first of all, the unions hate it, right? Because they're saying you can't pay people on outcomes. You must pay them for their time. Now, that's assuming that we're going to turn them into slaves and make them work really hard, right? The reality is, if you can produce high quality copy in a shorter period of time because you've been doing this for 20 years than someone who's only been doing it for 5, you now become more valuable. Whereas in the hours race, you might charge me $300 an hour and they charge me 200, and I'm measuring hours, not quality. Does that make sense?
Oh, absolutely. And I'm going to put it back at you, right? Because in your
Yeah.
previous world, you obviously were in a traditional coaching model that had
Yes.
retainers, long-term
Yep.
dependency, hourly type thinking, all right?
Correct. Yeah.
And now you've flipped it back to now we're actually giving you an actual outcome, which means you literally can start charging based on percentages of what it is that you bring back to the people instead
Right.
of that sort of retainer. And I can see where the value is in the work
Yeah.
that you're doing now.
Yeah. So bringing it back to the coaching world, I've been doing this for many years, and we have a retainer model. So we charge a monthly fee,
Right.
and it's sometimes somewhere in the vicinity of $2,500 to $3,500 per month. But if I said, "Hey, Prosper, my coaching is $2,500 a month," your first question is, "What do I get?" And I say, well, you'll get access to my 25 years of knowledge, and you'll get access to my library of information, and you'll get access to all the things that I've done. And your response will probably be, how many hours will you spend with me in that month? Now, if I said to you, we catch up once a fortnight for an hour, your mind goes straight to, that's $1,250 an hour. And I say, well, what about the 25 years of experience? Or what about and you go, well, that doesn't count because I'm paying for you. And so we end up in this dilemma where people say, I don't pay anyone $1,250 an hour. That's expensive. I can get a coach for $500 an hour. And they can, right? It's true, right? Because there's coaches at every hourly rate from $50 an hour up to $5,000 an hour. The difference is the quality of what they produce. Now, that frustrated me because coaching is starting to become commoditized. And you've probably seen this. Everywhere you go, there's a business coach. It's
Yeah.
unregulated. You don't need to get certified. You can just stick it on your business card and you can compete with me. So I'm sitting there going, this is really difficult because everyone thinks we're the same or not different enough to justify the price difference. So I broke the model and I said, I'm not doing this anymore. I'm not selling hours. And this is the conversation I had with my wife. I said, the only way I'm ever going to solve this problem is by selling outcomes over hours. Now, luckily, that was our company name because that was my belief from the day I started this business. So now we don't sell hours anymore. We have a couple of ways we engage clients, and one of them is that we can actually come in and build the whole business system inside their business for them. And what happens is it will produce an increase in the pay, it will reduce the payroll delta. So we look for what the opportunity cost is on how many dollars you're paying in wages versus what your return on wages is. And we can measure it specifically. So in other words, if I worked with you for 6 weeks, I'd say, Prosper, let's do the mathematics right now to see what it's costing you. And in 6 weeks, we'll do the maths again. And at the end of the 6 week period, if that number hasn't reduced by more than what I charge you, by an order of magnitude, by the way, not just by 10% more, by 2 or 3 or 4 times more, then this isn't working. And people go, you can do that? And I go, of course, if I know how to measure the problem and then we fix the problem, the measurement should reduce. And if it doesn't, then what we did is just have a great conversation. And so it's not how much time you spend with me, it's whether we can actually change that number. And it's very measurable. Actually, we have a calculator on our website that measures it. So if anyone's interested in working out what their uncaptured payroll is, it's basically 4 questions that you answer on the front page of our website. You just move the sliders and it'll give you your actual number.
Maybe we'll do that, as if time permits, so that people can actually see what it is that they're getting themselves into. But what
Sure.
you're actually saying here is, if a tradesperson comes to fix my roof, that person is much more valuable than the person who's got a clipboard and saying, "Oh, that could be a leak," because obviously they're not fixing the problem like what you guys are now doing, right?
Right. So what happens? Typically, trades will come out and they'll do a quote.
Right.
Okay. So you'll say, I've got a leak in my roof. And the plumber will come out and they'll look at it and they'll go, yep, we can fix that. And you go, how much is it going to cost? And they go, $85 an hour. Now, they haven't actually answered your question of how much it's going to cost because they haven't told you how long it's going to take. So it could be $85 or it could be $8,500, right? So then when you say, how long is it going to take? They go, well, we don't know until we look at it. That's still not a quote, right? That's just an offer to engage. And the $85 an hour is sort of meaningless because is it you or is it your apprentice that's going to go up on the roof for $85 an hour? So the hourly rate becomes a bit of ineffective in helping people understand how much it's going to cost to fix the leak on the roof. The guy that comes along and says, we charge $300 for a call out fee and then $15 for every 15-minute increment is still doing the time and materials charging. They're not quoting, they're just telling you what the rate will be when I turn the meter on. So the business person that can encapsulate what they do in value to a fixed price, number one. Number two, relate the fixed price to the benefit of what they do. So in other words, once I tell you how much it's going to cost to fix your roof, I'm going to tell you how much it's either going to save you or make you or solve. Then I can make a decision based on, well, David said it's a fixed price for him to come and fix my roof and it's going to cost me $500. And I can compare it to the open-ended quote of $85 an hour, which is an unknown quantity. Is that sort of making sense for you, Prosper?
Absolutely. Right. Now, I would have a question. Obviously, Dave, working in the tech space, right?
Yeah.
We have tools, say like Slack, where my team could be wherever they are, and they just pop in once in a while, quick question. How do we do this? What's the color scheme for this? And things of that nature. And I might take maybe 2 to 3 minutes of responding to that. I don't think I'm taking away from whatever the gap that you're talking about. It's part and parcel of what we're doing throughout the day, unless maybe they really need my attention. And then I have to maybe stop recording this video with you and attend to that, which obviously would never happen. But I'm just saying these, ways of just quickly sending that message and
but let's talk about that for a minute, right? Because let's say that's the case, right? You're talking to me right now and there's a Slack message that comes in and says, what color scheme should we use, Prosper? Now, you're not looking at the Slack message. You're looking at me. And so even though it's only a quick question with a quick answer, if you're not attending to it, that person can't continue that job. So that's called decision drag, okay? That is something that's increasing this delta for payroll. Now, it sounds very small, right? But there's a brilliant book written many years ago called The 1 Minute Manager Meets the Monkey, okay? And there's 16 books in the series, but this is my favorite one. And it talks about reverse delegation. And it's like saying, hey, Prosper, what color scheme should I use for this website? And if you don't answer me, I go, oh, I can't do it until he answers, so I'll wait. Now, here's the problem with payroll. You're paying me to wait. You're paying me to wait. So as long as you don't answer my question, I'm sitting there going, well, I'm stuck until Prosper tells me the answer. So be really careful because this sort of leakage is invisible because you think they're doing all the work and I'm just checking on their work. But every time a problem floats up like those red lines, which is even just a question, right? Hey, Prosper, what color scheme should I use on this website? The fact that they don't have that information and it lives in your head is a bottleneck. So we need to start being really critical about how many times you get interrupted. And that's why one of the measurements on the calculator is step away time. How many weeks can you step away from the business before it starts to level off? Not break and fall apart, but to slow down. Now, if you're checking Slack every day, it's not a long period of time because if someone doesn't answer those questions, those jobs stall. And those jobs stalling is what we call payroll delta or uncaptured payroll.
If it's in my world, that time that somebody's waiting, clients are already expecting maybe there's a timeline to a campaign that needs to go out and then I can see, and then we don't get paid, the ads don't go out or the work doesn't pop out and then it just works like that. So you did work with me earlier with your bottleneck calculator and it actually gives people a dollar figure showing the cost of still operating the way they're operating in their business. You've maybe spoken to a few other people and what actually happens emotionally when people see that number for the first time?
They don't believe it or they don't understand how it actually relates to them. So the first thing that happens usually is when I ask people to answer 4 questions, they look at the number and go, what is it? And I go, that's how much money you're leaving on the table in your business. And they go, that's too big. I don't believe you. I say, you put the numbers in, not me. All right. The calculator is just mathematical. So it's looking for 4 things, and I'll tell you what they are. If anyone goes to the calculator page, it's pretty simple. The first one is what's the revenue of the business? Okay, what's the revenue? Okay. The second one is how many hours do you spend in operations? Now, when you say I check Slack messages, they just might be micro moments, but if you added it up over the week, that's you spending time in operations. Okay. Any time that someone has to ask you a question, so whether it's a team member, a customer, or even the business itself, asking a question, which might be, we're running out of cash in the bank, Prosper, you need to tip in some of your savings because cash flow, right? Any of those things create drag. And those drag moments will end up in your plate. So even as an owner not working in the business, you're still being interrupted all day with, can you check this? I have a problem here. This customer's not happy. How come this guy didn't pay? Let's do creditors, let's do debtors, and constantly working in operations. Now, it's fine, right? Because as a small business, we have to be very clear about what we can and can't delegate, especially when we're really small, because we don't have the money to pay all these wages for all these people to run our business, or we would do it. So we've got to transition slowly. And what I mean by that is start looking for where people are stealing your time, not deliberately, but just because they don't want to make a decision. They don't want to own the problem. They want you to answer the problem. Because remember what I said before, ownership attracts problems. So if I work for you and I don't know how to make a decision and I say, I don't know if it's going to be red or yellow, let me check with Prosper. Because if I make that decision and I'm wrong, you're going to blame me. But if I say, Prosper, yellow or red, and you don't answer me, I go, well, I can't build it until you answer me. And then when you say red, I go, if you say red and I do red and they want it yellow, it's your problem, not mine. So people love, right, you're getting the picture, right? And it's very subtle, right? Because people think, no, my team's great. I love my team. They're fantastic. I go, it's not about your team. It's about how many times work stops because they're waiting. And when they're waiting, you're paying wages by the hour, not the outcome. So if I'm paying you for 10 hours and 3 of those hours are you waiting for me to respond to Slack, you still get paid. And that's what we call payroll delta.
Absolutely. Well, I think you've given language to something that a lot of business people have been struggling with, because you're not just now helping them build businesses that scale, right? You're actually building businesses that stop emotionally blackmailing their founders.
Correct.
This is what is happening in businesses every now and again. Like, you know, you read about wage theft, all right, where on the other side, the employee is saying, I haven't been paid my rights, awards, and everything else that comes along with it. But then you're now giving us a language for what is happening on the other side, because every moment that red is not, actioned on in the, in the workflow, that's time that is never going to be recouped, but somebody is still getting paid for that.
You got it. And if you want to see real world models, because this all sounds like theory, Uber is a classic case. I don't know about you, but every time I jump in an Uber, my first question is, how long have you been driving an Uber for? Yeah. What did you do before? And why do you drive Ubers? And I am always surprised what I hear, because I used to think, because you hear on the news, Uber drivers don't get paid much. We need a union for Uber drivers. And the Uber drivers themselves actually love the job. And there's 2 or 3 different categories that I found. One of them is that people love Uber because I can turn it on and do a job, and then I can turn it off and take 2 hours to have a snooze and spend some time with my family. And then when I'm bored, I turn it back on and I do a job. So it's called the gig economy, which moves away from hours. It's outcomes. You get paid for driving the car and actually picking someone up. Okay. So number 1 reason is flexibility. Number 2 reason is people who are semi-retired and they're bored sitting at home and they just want to talk to someone. I can now get paid to pick you up in my car and have a conversation with you. So this gives me communication and community. So people join Uber not because they're going to make millions of dollars out of it. They join Uber because it actually serves a purpose in their lives. So now they're trading their time for either money or for community. So there's a couple of different reasons. Now, this hasn't happened in small business yet because small business owners don't have the complexity or the wherewithal to build an app like Uber. But Uber has proven that people love driving Ubers, right? Because it gives them the convenience. You don't have to speak if you don't want to. You don't have to deal with cash. You drive your car around, someone jumps in. You don't have to say where you're going. It's on the map. You drop them off. You get paid. You don't have to chase the money. It's beautiful, right? They've made it very easy for the employee or the contractor in Uber's case to just do their job. We need to start replicating that philosophy in business, because here's my belief, right? If I'm paying someone to do a job and they're not producing, the onus is on me as the owner again, right? So I pay wages and now I have to make sure they're productive. And if they're not, it's up to me to get rid of them. And it's really hard to do because you have to prove that they're not productive. And then you go into unfair dismissal, workplace bullying, and all those other horrible things. Imagine if the day you start with me, I say, Prosper, I'm not paying you for your time. I'm paying you to write me ads. And the way I'm happy to pay you whatever you want to charge, but what I'm looking for is that ad produces more money than it cost me. And as long as it's doing that, I'll give you the next one and the next one. And the day it stops doing that, we'll have a conversation. It's a much more natural business relationship than ours.
You'd be surprised. That's kind of like how we're working with most clients now. It's now an outcome-based marketing, because anyone, like you said, anyone with a pair of sweatpants and a laptop can call themselves a marketer. There's these days, and there's companies like Meta that's laying off 6,000 people at a go. Where are all those people going to? They're just flooding the market. You know what I mean? So it's things like that you're talking about. But you might also, I don't know how you're going to answer this, David. How big is your security team? Because with what you're starting here, you really need to have a security team around the employees that are going to be disgruntled.
Security team? Look, it's interesting. You sort of talk about that, and I'll make a prediction here, and this is pretty bold.
Yeah.
Everyone's fearful of what AI is going to do to the employee marketplace, and we're all going to lose our jobs, because AI is going to take over. I'm going to make a suggestion to you, right? AI is not taking over jobs. AI is redesigning jobs. So what happens is two kinds of people will come out of this, right? Some people who are in trades that they don't believe will be replaced by AI. So people like plumbers are going, you know what, everyone needs a tradie and an AI can't do plumbing yet, okay? Because robots are coming in the next 5 years. We'll see them and everyone says, oh, I don't think so. They said that about self-drive cars and now they're on the road in Australia.
Yeah.
So technology is moving fast. It doesn't mean people won't have jobs. What it means is a lot of the operational mundane work can now be done through robotics or through AI or through some level of automation. What it means is that as an employee, I need to find out how I can add value, exactly like a business, to the point that the value is greater than the money that's being paid. So I'm not going to have disgruntled employees because the jobs are changing. And the people who want to change with the jobs, in other words, people who know how to use AI right now are much more valuable than people who are saying, oh, AI is going to take our jobs, because at least they are moving with the technology. So AI is what's called a structural change. And it's a bit like when the internet first came out, right? Yeah. You may or may not have been around, but I was there for the dot-com boom. I was in the IT industry and we were building websites for millions of dollars that you can now build for free. And the reason we were building them is it was a race to gain market share. Okay. Hey, everyone's going online, so we need to be there. The same thing's happening right now. There's going to be a lot of AI startups that will fail. There's going to be a lot of big companies that will drown because they went down the wrong path. But one thing that won't change is that every person who works in an office or in some sort of administrative work will have AI as part of their job description. Either they know how to use it themselves or it'll do part of their job so they can produce more. Now, here's the good news. Anyone who can produce more becomes more valuable. So in other words, the people who actually bring this into their world and make it part of who they are, right? And we call it augmentation, right? If you learn how to use AI to do your job better, you'll produce more and of higher quality. If you use AI to replace yourself, you will produce more of lower quality, right? And we've all seen this with this AI junk that comes out where people say, hey, write me a book, and it can write you a 500-page book in 5 minutes. Is it any good? Probably not, right? But if I use the AI to help me take my ideas out of my head and turn them into something saleable, it's a very different approach. So to answer your question, there's going to be some employees that are going to feel disgruntled, but they're the people who are not willing to change with the times. Now, you can maintain a job if you're in a secure industry, and there are a few, right? There's not many, but there's a few. And, things like nursing, we still need nurses. Plumbers, we still need plumbers. Personal trainers, they still need to be physical, even though you can use ChatGPT to do your training with. So there's elements that are going to stay around. But the fear I have for people is they think they're secure, but they haven't really thought it through. The people who are smart say, how is this wave of technology going to impact my industry? And what do I need to learn right now to make sure I'm at the top of my game? Are going to be worth 2 to 10 times more in the marketplace than they are right now. So you get a choice.
You're absolutely right. When this whole work from home thing started kicking in, I had mates, that are working in high profile jobs and they just don't know what to do with themselves when they're alone at home. And one of them, he's going to laugh at me for having mentioned this. He actually came and visited and he's like, you've been working from home for all this time. How do you stay productive? How do you manage to actually function? And I was like, well, because I was never given any other choice. And he came with his laptop sitting next to me, but his laptop was on just so that his team in headquarters would think he's actually doing some sort of work on there. But he was getting paid while he was talking to me at that particular time. So I can see where this is all going to come undone for a lot of people. Yeah. But somebody might be watching this and you know what I mean? Like somebody just says, oh, this now starts to feel less personal, less human, too
Yes.
systemized, and
Yes.
like it's now too gig economy type setup. How do you respond to people who fear systems would actually remove the culture that has already been created, or
Well,
whatever
this is the
creativity
important.
that could come out of that?
Yeah, it's a super important question, Prosper, because here's the reality, right? When the internet came along, everyone thought to themselves, oh my God, we're never going to send letters again. Oh my God, we're going to never visit people. Zoom, hey, we don't have to visit people. We can talk to them on Zoom all the time. But here's the truth. Zoom is just another channel of communication, which reduces the amount of travel that we have to do. So we can talk to more people in the same amount of time, but face to face is always better. The real issue is that face to face is 5 to 10 times more expensive than a Zoom call in terms of time and logistics. You used to know this. We used to run live breakfast events for our business.
I once drove all the way to Brighton and I was like, oh, all right.
You drove all the way to Brighton, number one. Number two is I paid for a breakfast for you to sit there. And number three, 50% of people who said they were coming didn't show up. So half the breakfasts went in the bin. And I used to cry about that, right? Because I'm sitting there going, this is horrible. We're paying for this venue and this food, and everyone says they're going to come. And then we hear, oh, sorry, kid's not well today. Oh, sorry, I'm stuck in traffic. Oh, I forgot all about it. And it became expensive. Now, here, let's play that through, right? I run a business and we have a breakfast and we invite 100 people. It's going to cost me about $5,000 in food and
Would,
venue.
yeah.
Okay, half the people don't show up, which means the people who did show up cost me twice as much because I still had to pay for the food and the venue, whether you showed up or not. And now I have to try and work out how to get a return on that investment out of the event. On top of, I still have to sell my product and I still have to deliver the service. Now I can do the same model on Zoom just like this, and I don't pay for breakfast. So all of a sudden my costs drop quite significantly. Two things happen. Number one is I don't have to worry about whether you show up or not because it doesn't cost me a breakfast and a room. Number two is you don't have to travel, which means it's more likely that you can attend my event because it's virtual and you can just turn it on your phone or on your computer. So it just changes the dynamic. Is face-to-face better? Yes. But getting people to join face-to-face is expensive and time-consuming. So they both fit into the world in different ways. And I think this is the bit people are missing. It's not an either or, it's an and. Right? So I can do face-to-face and I can do Zoom. I can do telephone and I can go on face-to-face. So I can do all sorts of different things, but having options means I can accommodate more people. So I think when people think scarcity, which means when something comes on that's going to replace me, that's a net zero. It's called a zero-sum game, right? So computer's going to come on, take my job, I won't have a job. It's not true. Computer comes along, takes your old job, you have to learn new skills to use the computer, and now you become more valuable. Different perspective, same problem.
Absolutely. You know what I like about that, and especially the example that you showcased about, all the events that you used to do prior, because I've attended the physical ones and the
Yep.
online ones. And obviously,
Mhm.
thank you so much for having actually given me the opportunity to present at some of them.
Yeah.
What this actually means is something that I think I've heard you say before, that freedom isn't freedom from work, because all of that you were doing prior was a lot of work, logistics, trying to get everybody in. And I
Yep.
remember somebody would have called me, are you coming? Make sure, you know what I mean? That also would have been a
Yeah, we had a
payroll.
whole logistics team for the event. So there were 3 or 4 people involved full time getting people to make sure, just to make sure you'd show up.
Right. And it's just freedom from obligation,
Yeah.
which you no longer have to be obligated to all of those things, yet the technology is now facilitating the same outcome without having to put in the money, time, and effort involved
Yeah.
prior. That actually sounds much more philosophical than operational. Or is it because I've been in your world long enough?
There's two elements to this, right? Some people prefer face to face. And you know what? Good on you. If that's what you want to do, make it profitable. Okay. Some people prefer Zoom because they don't want to travel. Good on you. Make it profitable. Comes back to that cycle I showed you before, right? The primary purpose of a business is to add value that is greater than the money in someone's pocket. Okay. So primary purpose of a business is not to make a profit. That's the result. The primary purpose is to add value that is greater than the value of the money in the customer's pocket. In other words, if I gave you $2 for every dollar you give me, how much would you give me?
So $2 for every dollar that I would.
Every dollar you give me, I'll give you $2 in return. How much would you give me?
Oh, infinite. Yeah.
But there's a question under there: is he telling the truth? Is he really going to give me? So there's questions of trust.
Yeah.
But in reality, what we're talking about is this idea of, if I can show you that there's more value than that I'm giving you than what you're giving me in return, it becomes infinity. And this is the law of abundance. Right? So it's not just, hypothetical. Abundance means getting more in return than you hand out. And if you can create abundance in your customer base, people will start throwing money at you. The trick is, and I was reading Elon Musk's biography. If anyone wants a good read, it's brilliant. And it's the Walter Isaacson one. And one of the statements he made in there that stuck with me is Elon Musk believes engineering will trump marketing every day of the week. Now, it doesn't mean that we don't need marketers. It just means you can engineer your marketing. Okay. And you know this is a fact, right? Engineering your marketing means measuring results and changing things according to the measurement. So we become iterative. And that creates a loop, just like the loop I showed you before. So everything in business runs on these virtual loops, okay? Some people see them as workflows and they call it a process with a start and a finish. I believe there's no start and finish in business because you keep serving clients and you keep getting paid and you keep serving clients and you keep employing people and you keep going in loops. And when you start to realize they're loops, you'll notice that lots of them are broken. And when we have broken loops in our business, they cost us money. In other words, we don't make profit, or we're working too hard, or the customer's not satisfied. They're all broken loops. And once you realize the loop is broken, you can fix it. And this is what a founder does versus an owner.
So David, here, I mean, obviously we will be concluding, but you've literally created a business that you would have wanted 25 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
And the people that are watching are at the stage at which, obviously, you've mentioned all those breakfasts that you were crying over and things like that. I thought I was the only person that cried over food, but the things you learned on the show. So
yeah.
So what would you say now to the person who is you of 25 years ago, who's still trying to, patch things together and thinking, you know what? I think in Australia, they've got this statement, should be all right, mate, and figuring it out by themselves.
Yeah. So here's the truth. You can do that. You can do whatever you like. No one should be telling you what you should do in your life. Your problem or your job is to work out, what problem do I want to solve? What do I want my business to look like when it's finished? All right. That's a weird question. And I picked up from Michael Gerber about 20 years ago. What will my business look like when it's finished?
Finished.
Because people say, what do you mean finished? I've just started, or I'm not going to retire anytime soon. And finished doesn't mean retired. Finished means running the way that you wanted it to run. So going back to our drawing up here, the picture, a finished business is that blue loop going round in circles with the founder observing and not being dragged in with the red lines that we had before. That's finished to me, right? So you get choices. You can choose to take 3 months off. Like next year, I'm planning a trip around Australia on a motorcycle, 3 months. I'll be out. And if my business doesn't run without me for 3 months, I'll come back to a car park. I'm not a business. So I need to make sure that I'm building my business so that I have the choice to work or not to work, and I also add value to my customers. And if I can do that through the business and the team ownership and the customer, I can then step away for a bit of time and breathe. Because I think the thing that's missing in most businesses is leadership, number one, right? And someone who's actually identifying, how do we contribute value to our constituents, to our customers? How do we build value in a market that's changed? AI is changing the world. So the founder has to look at it and say, how can I use this to add even more value to my customer? Because if I assume it's not going to affect me, but my competitor embraces it and they provide the service for half the price but higher quality, I'm in trouble. So we've got to keep our competitive edge, and that's a founder role, not an ownership role.
Absolutely. Now, David, I know you and I could go on and we could talk up until, the cows come home. But thank you so much for obviously, sharing your journey with us and also coming up with this, because I think now you've given language to what a lot of business people are facing and going through, because the goal is not to become less important. It's just to stop being the emergency exit for every problem.
Yeah. Stop becoming the escalation point in your business and start building escalation points into the process. And this is business systemization 101, but it's just in a way that's totally measurable. So if you're not sure what your uncaptured payroll is for your business right now, just jump on the website, outcomes.business. On our front page, the calculator's right there. You can move the sliders and work out the number. If you want to know how to fix it, we'll send you the prescription. So you go to the second page, because usually when we do find what the payroll, what the uncaptured payroll is, the second question is, where does it lie within the business? It lies in one of 4 areas, right? It's either going to be in the focus area, in other words, goal setting and project management. It's going to be in the fuel area, which is sales and delivery. It's going to be in the flow area, which is how effective are my team at delivering the service of my business, or it's going to be in the freedom area, which is how much time do I actually get. Now, we can identify those on the second page of the calculator, and then we can give you a structural prescription, which is exactly how to fix that problem. So that's on the website. It doesn't cost anything to do it. It's there. It's available for everyone.
Absolutely. I'll definitely put links to in the show notes so that people can head to that calculator and discover what the missing gap is for them. Now,
Yep.
David, thank you so much for your time, your knowledge and overall leadership in this space. So many people are still trying to figure out, how to remove the M dashes on Chat GPT, yet you're here already delivering what it was actually designed for. So I can't wait to see how this goes.
Thank you, Prosper, for the opportunity. I love to share the story, and I wish I could help you and your clients more, because I think too many people are going into business for the right reasons, but they just get stuck.
Oh, absolutely. Now, you also showed me my number, so definitely I will be getting back to you on that one. So for those that are watching, thank you too so much for tuning in. And I know this one was a little bit heavy, so this is the time where you want to make sure you're subscribed, and also just rewind and rewatch this, because most of the concepts that came through today might sound like you already know them, but this is a man that has taken 25 years to actually come up with all of this. So if you notice, today it wasn't just about business systems, it was actually about identity. It's about the moment where you as a founder realize that, wait a minute, I didn't build a business. I actually built a machine that only works when I'm actually suffering besides it. And that's no way to live, man. So check the link in the show notes so that you too can actually create a business that's profitable and enjoyable. And for those that haven't subscribed, make sure you are subscribed. Until next time, I encourage you to own your business before your business owns you. Bye for now.